generally lazy unless the work involved was interesting or necessary. Necessary to Kaylin, that is. For whatever reason, Hope lifted his head when Mrs. Erikson approached. To Kaylin's surprise, he then muttered the equivalent of a mumbled complaint and pulled himself to his feet. Mrs. Erikson was a constant, almost daily presence, a silver-haired older woman with slightly bent shoulders and eyes that were clear as day in a wrinkled network of a face. She never came by empty-handed. If there was an actual Mr. Erikson, none of the officers in the halls of law had ever met him. Some were certain he didn't, or had never existed. Kaylin hadn't quite managed to work her way up to that kind of deep cynicism yet, although older hawks told her it was only a matter of time. And while Mrs. Erikson could be difficult to deal with, it was mostly a patience deficit on the part of the hawks. Mrs. Erikson had never approached the front desk brandishing a knife, a club, a fire iron, or, in one instance, a highly illegal magical device. Nor had she approached the front desk demanding to see someone in charge while looking down her nose at the person who was manning the desk. She didn't consider the halls of law to be an extension of her personal fiefdom, and officers therefore her servants. As far as Kaylin could tell, the old lady truly valued the halls of law and the services it attempted to provide the citizens of Elantra. Kaylin had grown up in the fiefs. Old ladies in the fiefs had a kind of grit, a kind of steel to the spine. They'd have to have survived for as long as they had, even the ones who appeared sweet in a place where sweetness was the exception, not the rule. It took strength to be sweet. It meant you didn't care if people thought you were a mark or a victim. Kaylin had never been particularly sweet. But she'd trusted it when she encountered it, or trusted it enough that she didn't immediately pull daggers and back off. Pulling daggers here at the front desk would be severely career-limiting in any case, unless the visitor had run in heavily armed and obviously intent on causing damage. Even then, it wasn't daggers officers were meant to employ, but the sticks and batons that were part of their beat uniform. Neither of which would be necessary with Mrs. Erikson. She came armed with a basket, from which the scent of baking emanated. She never came empty-handed, and no one was fool enough to imply that the baking she brought was somehow poisoned. Also, Kaylin's stomach spoke before she could. Mrs. Erikson stopped 2 yards from the desk, her eyes widening at Kaylin, or more accurately at the shoulder ornament. While the rest of the hawks, and most swords, had proven that familiarity breeds, if not contempt, then comfort, Mrs. Erikson was not a person Kaylin saw every day. She expected Mrs. Erikson to have words or questions, and was slightly surprised to hear what they were. Mrs. Erikson smiled and set the basket on the desk. "You're here alone today?" "My partner has meetings." "Without you? How odd, but I'm glad you're here." Kaylin found this mildly confusing, because she had encountered Mrs. Erikson only once before, and as far as she knew, Severn always managed to avoid the damn front desk, which was annoying because she was certain he'd be better at it than she was. Mrs. Erikson had baked soft buns with a hint of red at the edges. Jam of some kind. She removed napkins from the top of the basket and then placed 2 buns on them before offering them to Kaylin. "I should have made cookies instead. These are a bit crumbly and likely to cause a mess on the desk. I'm sorry, dear, I just wasn't thinking. But I was told that these would be welcome today." And there it was. Mrs. Erikson had a ghost problem. Or a several ghosts problem. Although not all of her visits involved reports about the doings of said ghosts, most did in one fashion or another. Investigations had been done. This was Elantra, after all, and ghosts were not quite as ridiculous as they sounded on the surface. This wasn't to say that the halls of law believed in the existence of ghosts. Rather, that there were many magical artifacts and echoes of older or ancient wars that somehow lingered, and the residue could cause confusion, panic, and, yes,